Hey, what's up you guys? It's Bloody Jacob here to bring you a special Mother's Day video. Not really. We're actually going to be reviewing one of my favorite vampire horror movies of all time, if not my very favorite vampire horror movie of all time, 30 Days of Night, which I do own. And but really though, this isn't a Mother's Day video, but I did want to wish all the mothers out there and all my subscribers' mothers, anyone who watches this, very happy Mother's Day. Really appreciate the time you have with them, you know. Like with mine, I give her a lot of crap, I'll admit it. She's had to put up with a lot of stuff over the years from not just me, but from my whole family. And yeah, I just sincerely appreciate her, so thank you, Mom. And yeah, let's get into this review. I watched it like about a week ago with my girlfriend Lily. We were planning on reviewing it together, but we waited a few days and she didn't remember as much of it as she was wanting to. And I don't either. Well, I've actually seen this movie at least a couple times by now, and as you know, it's one of my favorites, as I said. And yeah, so forgive me if I'm not as precise with this review as I could be, but I still did really want to talk about it. And like I said, it's one of, if not my favorite vampire horror movie of all time, along with Stakeland, which I reviewed a little while ago. Check out that review on my channel if you want to go back and watch it. And yeah, this has to be my other favorite, if not above Stakeland. I might still put it above Stakeland. I'm actually planning on doing a video at some point comparing 30 Days of Night with Stakeland. So look forward to that at some point within the next few months, possibly. We'll see. But yeah, this is just a fantastic horror movie, and they really do vampires right. You know, there's no Twilight crap. There's no teen drama or anything like that. Nothing like that of the sort. The vampires in this are brutal, really intelligent, and creepy as hell looking, okay? And yeah, so these are vampires done the right way. I mean, and you know I review things like the Vampire Diaries and Being Human and stuff, where yes, you could argue that, you know, that's kind of like newer vampires and stuff like that. But you know, vampires can still have really good characterization to them and stuff like that, which is, I think, Being Human and the Vampire Diaries both do. You know, they write them really well, despite them not, you know, looking like that or something. You know, just a different type of story. And Being Human and the Vampire Diaries are both a million times better than anything Twilight related. So at least give it that. And but this is just a perfect example, pretty much almost perfect example of what a vampire movie should be nowadays. That and Stakeland, as I said before. And the cover is really cool on this thing. I mean, look at it. It's very awesome. And of course, it stars Josh Hartnett. And I really like this actor a lot. I mean, you know, I've seen him in Pearl Harbor. I've seen him in this. I've seen him in Halloween 20 Years Later. I'm sure other things I'm forgetting about right now. And of course, currently I love him on Penny Dreadful as, you know, Ethan Chandler. It's probably my favorite role of his. You know, is his performance as Ethan. But this, I'm very glad he's in. He does pretty well with his character Eben in this movie. And also stars Melissa George as his girlfriend, Stella, I think her name is in the movie. And you know, there's this whole subplot that they kind of have going on in the movie about how I think they're either married or engaged or something along those lines. And for some reason or another, they broke up, they split apart. And of course, they're in Alaska, the small Alaskan town. And so everyone kind of knows them as a couple, they know them to be together. And sort of, you know, so people are like sort of questioning them here and there throughout the movie as to why they're still not together, you know, they're so great and stuff. And Stella is about to leave on the airplane before, you know, the night and the winter comes in and stuff like that. And I'll talk more about the setting in this movie shortly, because that's one of the best things about it. But, and so it kind of forces them to interact more with each other again. And that's one of the gripes I do have with this movie, is the fact that we never really find out what happened between Eben and Stella. And so that kind of bugs me a little bit. they could have just like talked about it really quickly or something, or just someone else could have brought it up, like mentioned it or something along those lines. I don't know. Well, did one of them cheat? Did something else happen? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's not really a main concern in a vampire horror movie. But if we're really supposed to care about these characters, I feel like we should at least know why they broke up. I feel like that's a pretty basic thing. But nonetheless, it's something I can get over pretty quickly because the rest of the movie is pretty much fantastic. Really nothing less than that. And I mentioned the fact that they're in a small Alaskan town. Josh Hartnett plays Eben, the sheriff of the town. And the setting in this movie could very well be the best thing about it, along with the vampires themselves. Because they're in Alaska. They're in an area where they have literally 30 days no sunlight for an entire month. And that's just like the perfect or the worst possible place for a vampire to be in, depending on who you are. If you're the vampires themselves, it's a paradise. But if you're any human or animal whatsoever, it's pretty much a nightmare. So that's like the perfect ideal place for vampires to go. A straight month, no sunlight. You can just pick off as many people as you want within that time period. And I really like the way the setting is in this movie. It's that small Alaskan town. It feels eerie. It feels really isolated and sort of like empty. It's a small town, but yet it feels like doom. You know what I mean? And that's one of the other great things about this movie. There's really not much in the way of a plot. The vampires are in the town, and eventually our characters find out that that's what's going on. After Ben Foster's character, the stranger, sees that ship coming in at the beginning, and he's waiting in the jail cell and stuff like that for the vampires to turn him, basically. And but really, the story, there isn't really much of one here. But it really didn't need to have too much going on in it. It's a simple story and a simple movie, yet it's great. And sometimes simple done well or perfect is better than complex and things like that, when it's all over the place and not quite as well done, or not quite as quality. So I'll take this simple plot with pretty much perfect execution with what it is over anything else. So I'm really happy with the plot, even if there's not an over amount to it or anything like that. They knew what they were doing and they did it well, in my opinion. So I'm happy with the story that there is in it. And like I said, I love that feeling of isolation because of the setting in this movie. And really, the story is our survivors are trying to hide from the vampires, because they know a town, so they do have a chance to sort of survive for a little while by finding a place to hide out. They find this house with an attic in it and stuff like that. And the attic, thing that you pull down to bring the attic, to open the door to the attic, it's kind of hard to notice. And so the vampires won't really notice that, if they just came skulking or lurking on through and stuff like that. So I think that is a pretty good idea on the characters' parts. And of course, no flights are coming anytime soon, so they kind of just fly out, and they couldn't drive off because I think the nearest town they said was 30 or 50 miles away. And you've seen how in one scene one vampire jumps on this car that Eben and Stella are in. And it's almost able to completely cause them to crash into something. So I think even if they did try to drive off and drive as far as they can to get as close to the next town as they can, the vampires probably would have went after them or picked them off before they even got in the vehicle. So we really didn't have much in the way of options here, minus hiding and trying to, wait out that period with no sunlight for the whole month. And as they're hiding out, we have this great feeling of doom, impending terrible doom. And you really feel like the walls are sort of closing in on the characters. And that's exactly how it should be. It's really intense, it's really gritty and dark and stuff like that. And as far as the blood and gore in it, there's a fair amount. I mean, there's actually a little bit less than you might originally expect. Of course, the majority of it comes from the vampires biting necks and stuff like that. But they actually do that pretty quickly in the movie. They don't really focus on that too much. But when they do bite into necks, it's pretty brutal. Even if they don't show a lot of blood, you can tell how brutal it looks. And there is still a decent amount of blood in it. because they bite into the next one, they sort of like rip and tear as they're doing it, which is pretty intense looking. And probably the goriest scene in the movie is okay, I'll just tell you, even Josh Hartnett's character in the movie, he has this best friend named Billy, I think, and Billy ends up hiding out with his family, like separate from the main group we see. And Billy, unfortunately, his wife and child are both killed by vampires off screen. We don't see it, but eventually even the rest of them do run into Billy again. He's sort of all on his own. He's grown a beard over the month and stuff like that, just as Eben has sort of like grown a little one himself. And we just see he's a completely broken man. We see just the way he's acting, the way he's just breaking down at every few steps he takes, and you can't really blame him. That's a pretty realistic take on what would be, what we would feel like. And unfortunately, the goriest scene in the movie that I was talking about comes from when Billy is unfortunately attacked by a vampire and bitten. And it's very difficult for Eben, Josh Hartnett, to put him down. And they don't really have any, I don't think they had any guns with them at the time, because they realized that the guns weren't stopping the vampires anyway, so why carry one around, So what Eben has to end up doing is he has an axe, and he basically has to chop Billy's head off before he turns. And yeah, they show it. I forget how often they showed the blade actually going into his neck, but they showed his head hanging off his neck and stuff like that. It was quite a lot of blood. But as a horror and slasher fan, I can handle it. I've seen plenty of stuff like that before. But to others, it's probably really, really gruesome. And it is still gruesome, but it's probably even more shocking to them. But yeah, nonetheless, I didn't really have an issue with it. But that's probably the goriest scene in the movie. And I talked about this earlier, but just the way we feel the wall is closing in on our survivors as the vampires pick them off. And another thing I really liked about the vampires in this movie, they look creepy, like I said, and they're actually really intelligent. And that actually shows a lot at the beginning with what they do. They pretty much sabotage the town before they really fully reveal themselves. They cut off the power and different things like that. And they really make them feel trapped. And really, it's really good to see them have that intelligence, as a lot of vampires do. Yeah, they're so savage and brutal. Yet they still have a really well thought out plan and stuff for getting their food for feeding. So I like that a lot. And they also have this sort of vampire language in the movie as well. They grunt and do different little moans and groans, I guess. And they have subtitles in the movie to show what they're actually saying to each other, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I actually read that they came up with the language entirely for this movie. I think they talked to some kind of professor. They talked to some kind of professor at a college or a school of some kind, and they actually came up with the language all on their own, which I thought was really cool, and something they didn't necessarily have to do, but they did, and that added details is one of the really good things about the movie too. And it's one of the characters is saying please God and stuff like that, and the lead vampire, who's actually played by let me see if I can find his name, Danny Huston, I think. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name, but he also played Stryker and X-Men Origins Wolverine. And yeah, he's a very good lead. I really like how they pronounce that. He's sort of the alpha of the group, sort of the leader. I like that a lot. And yeah, the ending for this movie is just phenomenal. It's one of the more unique endings I've seen out of any horror movie, and it's just really awesome and badass and emotional at the same time, because we basically see that there's a couple days, or I think it's 2 or 3 days is left by the end of the movie before the sun comes up again at the end of the month. But they know the vampires are just sort of waiting on to pick them off. They're not in any rush. They're having fun. They're taking their time. They're playing games and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty creepy and cool at the same time. Apologize for the armpit hair. But so I feel the vampires are at some point about just all charge in there, just slaughter them all at some point, even if they were just waiting and letting them hide or wherever, They're just having fun with it, pretty much. And this is sort of like a vacation for the vampires too, you know, like we see the vampires communicating towards the earlier part of the movie, saying we should have came here ages ago. And I like how it also gives us a sense of, you know, that these vampires have probably been around for quite a while. So maybe they've been around for a few hundred years at least, maybe 1,000, I don't know. But the ending for this is great because I told you about Billy's death in the movie, and Stella ends up being trapped outside as yeah, it was good. Okay, before I get to the ending, though, it was good seeing Ben Foster as a stranger in the movie. Of course, I really liked Ben Foster as playing the Dave character, one of the roommates or the apartment people in the 2004 Punisher movie with Tom Jane. Remember, he was the guy with all the piercings in that movie. So it's good to see him in this one as well. I've seen him in plenty of other things by now, by now too. I know he played Angel in the X-Men movies in the brief scenes he had, and he was also in 3:10 to Yuma. But so yeah, he was pretty good in this, allowing the vampires to turn him. And when the vampires came into that like sheriff office type of thing, they seen him, and the leader had convinced him that they would turn him in exchange for helping them like he did, with the ship and stuff like that. And sort of just like starting the fear and the panic in the town and things of that nature. But yeah, even the head vampire sort of jokes, yeah, he shouldn't have believed us, or how easy he was to fool and stuff. Is basically what he talks about. Then he just ends up snapping the guy's neck. Poor guy. He did all that shit and acted like a complete dick for nothing. But yeah, he also killed like some huskies at the beginning too, which is sad to see, with that knife and stuff. But yeah, back to the ending. Stella and Melissa George's character ends up being trapped outside with a little girl who happened to actually survive and wander out onto the streets. And so they're like hiding out under this like wrecked car. And what the head vampire ends up doing is he's basically pours gasoline all over the town, and then he lights it on fire, and burning the town to the ground to destroy any trace of what actually happened there. So when other people eventually find out about it, from America and stuff like that, they're just gonna think there's some kind of like horrible accident, And so that fire is gonna eventually get to Stella and the little girl. Whether the car would explode or not, I don't think so, because it was pretty much like a hollowed out, wrecked car, But still, eventually would have gotten to him and started burning him. Either that, or Stella would have been forced to get out of the car, to get out from under the car with the girl, and then the vampires would have spotted him, and then she would have been completely torn apart. So Eben didn't have a lot of options to save her. I mean, they were communicating on the walkie-talkie type of thing, and even though we didn't really find out why they split apart in the first place, they did have a really good moment as characters here, because they basically just really apologized to each other just within a few short sentences. And even Stella said she never should have left Eben. And so maybe that gives us a little bit of an idea that maybe it was something Stella did, or it was maybe something Eben did that she overreacted to, I don't know. Or that she was wrong in a situation, she basically admitted to it. And then that basically pushed Eben to really go all out to save her. We've seen how concerned he was. And again, they didn't have a lot of options. Even if they hide it out for another couple days, they would have been they would have been found anyway. Like I said, I think the vampires were just having their jollies, and before they just slaughtered them, pretty much like bugs, And so they had to like fight back in some form or fashion, or do something else other than hide. Otherwise, they'd probably just be killed within a day at least. And so Eben basically uses a syringe to take some of Billy's blood from his body, and he injects himself with it to turn himself into a vampire. And, they're kind of questioning whether they could trust Eben doing that, because how much of himself will be left for how long as he's turning into a vampire, before he goes completely instinctive and savage and tries to kill them, But Eben points to the fact that, some other people who were turned, took a while to fully lose themselves as by turning into a vampire. Like we've seen one scene of another guy who had his wife taken from him. He was hiding out under a house for like 2 weeks, and we realized he was turned into a vampire. But yet he still seemed to be pretty early on with the stages of the vampirism and stuff like that. So Eben is kind of discussing that he can actually hold out to being himself for at least long enough to try and kill the leader of the vampires in the town and stuff. And I really like the eyes and the the little bit of makeup they used for Josh Hartnett. When Eben did that. It wasn't really much, but yeah, they showed his teeth a little bit more and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. And so yeah, Eben goes out just right out there to fight the leader. And the vampires, are probably used to like, certain members of themselves like fighting for dominancy or dominance. I mean, or seeing who will be the alpha at a certain point. I'm sure they decide that every few hundred years, hopefully. So I feel like the vampires, yes, they could have just completely swarmed Eben and he probably would have been dead, even as a vampire. But I feel like they sort of like understood like the order of things among them and stuff like that. And Eben, even though he is a vampire at this point, he's still very early on. He's hardly a vampire. Even though he is, and so he still has a very big disadvantage going against the leader because this leader has been around for like hundreds of years or maybe 1,000. I don't know. So he's like really strong and experienced, as opposed to Ethan, who's still like this new, fresh vampire. And we get a really brutal fight. Eben is unfortunately, thrown around a lot and stuff like that. But what ends up happening is, as the leader's taunting him, he jumps out and then Eben just like punches through his mouth, and like he just punches a hole through his head basically. And that was pretty brutal. A very lucky shot, but one of the most brutal shots nonetheless. And so Eben ends up killing the leader in front of the other vampires, and the vampires, yes, they could have attacked him over it, but yeah, they've seen that Eben pretty much established himself as stronger than the leader, or as like better or tougher than the rest of them because he killed the leader. And so they couldn't do anything about it. That's like their order, that's their way of things. And so the vampires actually left after that, after seeing what Eben was able to do to their head, their leader. And it's good to see Eben's brother actually survive the movie too. I forgot to mention him a little bit. It was sad to see, we didn't really see the grandma die, but we knew she died off screen, as the little brother talked about. It's good to see the little brother survive though, and Stella comes out, and we see like as we get to pretty close to dawn, the sun's starting to come up. Eben, is hanging on to his last string of humanity before he lets himself die in the sun. And Stella's sort of holding him and cradling him, and they share like a last little kiss between each other, which I thought was really touching. And Ethan just sort of like eventually just burns away into black ash, and that's pretty much where the movie ends, as Stella emotionally grieves over it. And yeah, it was quite the ending. I know my girlfriend was pretty upset watching it. She was pretty scared of the movie, but she also like felt for the characters too, which I thought was really cool. And yeah, the ending was really good. Like I said, it was really unique and badass with what Eben did to save Stella and the rest of them at the end. Of course, it's always cool to see vampires fighting each other, so that was awesome too. And then we got that emotional touch at the end with, Eben trying to save Stella and the final moment they had in the sun, I thought that was really good. And I never seen the direct-to-DVD sequel, 30 Days of Night. I never seen that. I never seen 30 Days of Night, The Dark Days. I just heard that it's a lot worse than the original movie right here, the one I've been talking about. And I don't want to see The Dark Days, even if it does have Catherine Isabelle in it for a little bit. Because it just sounds like it completely ruins what the original movie did. They recast Stella, and then they kind of mess up the whole Eben thing and what happened to him too by having him, kind of still being alive. I don't know. But I think this works. 30 Days of Night works best as sort of like a standalone vampire movie. And I just stick with the ending we've seen for this in the original movie. Eben dies, after saving everyone. So I like that. So I think this should just like stay on its own. Forget about the sequel. Even though I might check it out sometime, but if I do, I'll make a video on it. But I definitely don't plan on it. I still consider this to be the only thing about it. And it's really cool that it was adapted from like a book or a comic book and stuff like that too. I like that. It wasn't adapted from a comic book actually. It sort of went like the guy who made this was actually originally intending it to be a movie in the first place. But it was like a really hard pitch to all these studios and stuff like that. So he made it into a comic book or a book instead. And then when he pitched the book into a movie adaptation to the studios, they actually picked it up after that. So yes, it was technically a comic book or a graphic novel first, but it was actually originally intended to be a movie in the first place, which I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, 30 Days of Night, there's really my review. I said what I mainly wanted to say about it. Vampires were done pretty much perfectly in this movie. I may do a video comparing this with Stakeland at some point down the road. It could be within the next few months. I don't know. But yeah, the vampires are great. They're really intelligent. They're brutal. They're savage, scary, creepy. I like Josh Hartnett's character a lot. I like his performance. Especially, another scene I liked was when he said goodbye to his brother before he went out to fight the leader at the end. That was pretty emotional. I kind of forgot about that before I watched it. Rewatched it this time. So that was really good too. The acting was all around pretty solid. Although I do wish we could have spent more time with the characters sort of like interacting with each other. I would have liked that. That would have helped, as well as finding out why Stella and Eben were split in the first place. But nonetheless, they did share like a really good touching moment with each other. A couple of them towards the end actually. So I still thought it was done fairly well. And yeah, I really like the environment, the setting, everything. It felt really isolated, really good atmosphere, and it really intense. And just like the feeling of seclusion and doom in the movie. And yeah, Alaska, the perfect place for a vampire movie. 30 Days of Night. No sunlight for an entire month. And yeah, definitely one of my favorite, if not my favorite vampire movie of all time. I probably will say it is my favorite vampire horror movie of all time, with Stakeland and maybe a few others after that. And yeah, it's kind of hard compared to like Dracula movies too, because even though it's another vampire tale, I feel like it's still a different type of story, So yeah, there's my review for 30 Days of Night, I'll say my favorite vampire movie of all time. Hope you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time, most likely for my review of Game of Thrones, of the episode tonight. That'll be up by either late tonight or tomorrow, as always. And I'll probably also review the episode of Penny Dreadful that airs tonight at some point early this week as well. So yeah, I'll catch you guys for both of those. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and peace.